One thing we have implemented very successfully over the last 2 years is a high volume hiring program, which we call team hiring, where we essentially trying to live out an always on hiring methodology, where rather than having a series of transactional interviews, allowing our recruiters to do a lot of pre-screening very early on and slide candidates into a process and being more organized around how we get candidates to that in-person stage a little bit faster.
Don't conduct your analysis in isolation because data is so incredibly powerful.
Not defending just the tribe, but defending the organization.
Those creative people that you really want to keep empowered, keep excited, keep motivated, keep thinking.
A good experience pays dividends down the line.
Stereotypes tend to break down in proximity.
Welcome to We're Only Human, a podcast about human resources, business, technology, and the workplace. My name is Ben Eubanks, your host, and I'm so glad you're here.
Hey everyone, welcome to We're Only Human. I am Ben Eubanks, your host, and I am joined by not one, but two incredible guests today. We're going to be talking about AI, hiring, how to screen for the best people, all those kinds of good things. So I'm excited to be joined by Matt Leitzman. He's the VP of Talent Acquisition at Mastercard, and Craig Drysdale, the VP of Talent and Engagement at Leonardo. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Hi.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I'm excited to jump into some of the fun stuff today and really understand how you both and your organizations are approaching some of these conversations around finding the best candidates, really weeding through the stack of resumes, all those sorts of things. But before we get to some of that good stuff, I'd like to take a minute and let the audience know more about who you are and what you do. So Craig, would you start us off?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So Craig Drysdale, I lead our talent and engagement teams at a company called Leonardo. We are a global aerospace and defence organisation. My team focus on the UK market, and just in terms of scale, we have about 9,000 employees based across the UK. You can probably tell from my accent. I'm also based in the UK. I'm from Scotland originally. And yeah, like other organisations, we are looking for the very best talent from a sort of tech, digital, engineering perspective. So very much looking at how we can attract the best candidates and then provide the best sort of candidate experience from a recruitment perspective.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you're here, Craig. Matt, how about you?
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so I am Matt Leitzman. I'm based here in Boston. I work for Mastercard. We have about a little bit over 30,000 employees globally and doing business in 200 plus countries. I lead a team within talent acquisition that's called the Talent Discovery Team. And we are about 20 professionals with a background in direct talent sourcing, talent insights, recruitment marketing. And we essentially focus on the top end of the recruiting funnel. So very much focused on engaging with external talent in the marketplace that we have an interest in engaging with and trying to do our best to get noticed and getting talent excited about career opportunities at Mastercard. We do hire in lots of different locations, but have a particular stronghold in some of our tech hubs that are spread out across the world. And yeah, so super excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Great. I'm so excited to have both of you here. Either one of you would have been a great conversation, but both of you together, I think it's going to be action-packed. So I'm excited to dive into this. Just to kind of kick us off, let's cast a broad net over the conversation. Craig, there's so much happening right now when it comes to finding and screening candidates. What excites you most about how candidate screening is evolving today?
Yeah, it's definitely moved on and significantly, I'd say, in the last couple of years. We attract lots of interest in our business, and to be able to get to the very best candidates, we need to be using screening tools. So whether that be at a very basic level, looking at requirements. So within the aerospace and defence industry, we are very highly regulated in terms of who can work in certain parts of our business, in certain programs. And being able to use screening to be able to quickly establish who that is obviously allows me and my team to be able to focus more efforts on the people that can fulfill those roles from a requirement perspective. But I think also provide that clarity to people that can't. Before the implementation of some of our screening techniques, they'd be some of the candidates that we might not get back to quite as quickly as we would have liked. But with the implementation of effective screening, people can really understand pretty quickly, are they going to get by the first stage in our recruitment process? If they are, that's great. They can expect a call from the team a lot quicker. And unfortunately, if they're not, at least they have that clarification really quickly in the process. And we've only found that is enabled through really effective use of screening from a sort of automation perspective.
That's one of the things that we see in the data over and over again, that candidates tell us that the best way companies can show respect for them is just get back to me, acknowledge me. Any of us want that in our work lives and our personal lives, and hiring is no different. So they're looking for that sort of thing. So thanks for calling that one out. Matt, you talked about y'all being on the candidate discovery or the talent discovery side of that. I think that's a great term and a great sort of vision for the work that y'all are doing there. What for you is exciting about this candidate screening landscape right now?
Sure. Yeah, I would break it down into two parts. There is the screening that takes place once somebody applies and they officially said, hey, I'm interested. I want to hear from Mastercard. Tell me more about this role. So it's that sort of screening. But then a lot of the screening that we do actually takes place before the application process. So this is indirect screening, I would say. One of the advantages that we have working in talent acquisition these days is that almost everybody or most people that we are looking to hire are findable before they apply. And we're trying to be very intentional about using data and technology to essentially identify and, air quotes, pre-screen talent before they apply, and then being very diligent about nurturing that talent that we have an interest or that we would love to apply. So that's one thing. And certainly with the advancements of automations and some AI use cases, we're super excited about that potential. And then the screening piece, I think what I'm most excited about is the fact that in recruiting and in talent acquisition, we are becoming more and more we're operating more like a marketing or a sort of modern consumer type marketing organization. So not only is there lots of potential in terms of screening the right candidates, but also just making it a really great experience for talent. So when somebody engages with us and they're applying, are there ways for us to leverage automations to make that experience just top notch and something that candidates are super excited about? So that's kind of the two areas where I see the biggest opportunities.
There's some good similarities there between, because Craig started off with requirements, making sure we're clear on what we're looking for and knowing those sorts of things really in depth. Because if you don't know, you're always going to be frustrated with what you end up with. And so knowing your endpoints, and then you talked about some of the experience around that. And so I'm hoping today, as we go through the conversation, we can really dig into some of the things we can do besides just responding, but talking about some of those tailored experiences and how to connect those in, because that really matters. We see in the data, it matters. And I'm sure you see in your own data as you're serving candidates and working with them, when we can get back to them, they're more satisfied. They'll come back later on. We're seeing those sorts of things. So let's continue through the discussion here. Craig, one of the things that I wanted to really talk to you both about today is around high volume hiring, early career hiring, those sorts of unique, distinct areas, because all hiring we know isn't the same across the board. Talk about some of the challenges that you're seeing at Leonardo when it comes to those types of hiring.
Yeah, I think it's significant for a couple of reasons. We employ on early careers programs about 450 people every year, all across the UK, across all of our business units. In 2024, for our campaigns last year, we had over 60,000 applications for those, for 450. So I said it was a nice problem to have, but in seriousness, it is a bit of a problem because there's lots of people vying for very few opportunities in comparison. So having a level of screening at the beginning of that process is absolutely fundamental. It simply would be too much for a team of even the best recruiters, the highly skilled recruiters. They just don't have the time or capacity to be able to get through those applications quick enough. And especially in a marketplace where it's very competitive, time is absolutely critical. So the people that are applying to our opportunities, I'm sure are applying to lots of other organisations. They want to hear back quickly. They want to know the next steps. And with that volume, again, screening becomes absolutely fundamental to being able to progress people quickly. I would also say that in amongst that population, we are seeing people use their own form of application tools, if I want to call it that, where they're able to apply using various forms of AI to lots of positions at the same time. So they're able to produce lots of applications at the same time. So we as an organisation need to be able to respond to that quickly. And we're only seeing that grow. We're particularly seeing it through the sort of university applications. But I suspect if it's not already happening already, that'll very quickly filter through to what we call professional hiring. So that's your hiring of experienced hires, those types of tools and systems that people are employing to apply for multiple positions in a matter of seconds. That will no doubt apply across other forms of hiring. So yeah, really important to be able to respond to that volume quickly and get to those candidates that are really the closest fit for our roles so that we can continue the conversation.
That timing piece is super critical. The data we have on ghosting says that 2 of the top 3 reasons candidates ghost employers or withdraw their application is I took another job or the hiring process just took too darn long, basically. It's paraphrasing, but like it matters a lot. As you're saying, when that number of people are applying and have interest in what you're doing, they're hoping, again, for a response, but also for an opportunity there. And so even if it's a no, if it's handled properly, it's going to end up better off than if it's just a no response at all when it comes to that. Matt, what are y'all seeing there at Mastercard when it comes to some of these high volume types of hiring activities?
Yeah, so I would break it down into 2 buckets again. There are certain locations where we don't struggle receiving applications. One thing we have implemented very successfully over the last 2 years is a high volume hiring program, which we call team hiring, where we essentially trying to live out an always on hiring methodology where rather than having a series of transactional interviews, allowing our recruiters to do a lot of pre-screening very early on and slide candidates into a process and being more organized around how we get candidates to that in-person stage a little bit faster. So we're using automated interview scheduling for that. And we're using an accelerated pre-screening process to make those moments that matter the most to candidates. And those are those in-person moments with recruiters and hiring managers, like getting to that stage a little bit faster than in the past.
So one of the things I neglected to mention at the beginning of the conversation is that we were introduced by the team over at Phenom. And would I be correct in assuming that some of that part you're talking about there, the automated interview piece and some of the other sorts of pieces in there are powered by some of the stuff they're doing, Matt?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Anything else that you're doing on the using some of their screening capabilities to support your hiring? Or was that really the key parts there?
So we are very early on in our sort of screening technology journey. So we're looking at a number of different options. And again, it will probably change a little bit based on the position level and also the location and then the hiring volume in general, or application volume, I should say. The one area that we have started to leverage is video assessment on the sort of campus hiring front. And that has again, elevated our experience to talent and also has started to speed up the process on the screening side, which is really fabulous to see.
Those phrases don't usually go together, Matt. When we say we added screening and it sped up the process, people are out there like, okay, wait a minute, hold on. Those seem to opt into the spectrum. But if we're using an automated screening tool, we can see more people at the same time and cut through to the right ones. Is that kind of fair to summarize that?
It's true. And I think the biggest thing that's important to keep in mind when you're thinking of automations or AI or any other type of sort of technology capability is try to lead with what experience are you trying to create. So rather than saying, oh, I got to buy all this automation and I got to use AI and I got to use this and that, it's more like, hey, what is the ideal case experience that you're trying to create? And then take a step back and see, are there tools, automations, technologies out there that allow you to elevate that experience as opposed to doing it the other way around. So that's why some of these steps that I mentioned might seem counterintuitive, but if you actually think about it, it actually elevates the experience to the candidate as well as to the recruiters.
All right. So Craig, you heard about some of the stuff that Mastercard's doing there. And I would imagine y'all probably have some similar things built into screening, making sure you're picking the right people. You talked about the massive number of applications just for one specific program you're hiring for a certain number of people. So I have to imagine some of those other things are true there. What other things are y'all doing on the technology side, the screening side, Phenom as an example, to try to cut through that, to do the automation, some of those things you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, I think just to build on that, within the Phenom platform, there's different types of screening. So before we've talked about some fairly basic, would you qualify for this role? We also use the video assessment. I think it does help the effectiveness and efficiency of the process because it brings the application to life much sooner in the process. If you think of a fairly traditional recruitment process where you've got a sort of application, you've got a CV, you might then get to a conversation, a phone call, maybe a screening call with a recruiter, and then you get to meet with the hiring team. With the introduction of video responses much sooner in the process, then you really get that sense for that application beyond just the sort of CV. So I think that's really good. The other thing is looking at, we do some exercises. We do that outside of the platform, but again, that's a useful way to be able to test, particularly for some of our manufacturing roles, is there a way to replicate the job content as part of the recruitment process? And then finally, you're able to have ranking and scoring questions. So depending on how somebody responds to a screening question, it can either put them closer to your ideal candidate or further away. And again, that's just really useful, and it creates some really interesting conversations with the hiring team when you're saying, okay, well, this type of response, is this what you would like to see? And sometimes that then drives conversations around, well, yes, that's perfect, or actually, do you know what, that's maybe not quite so relevant to the role. So I think really getting into the screening and getting to the heart of, well, what are the absolute critical skills, experience that somebody needs, it does again help the process become more effective, because it's not just built on a sort of competency-based interview. You're really going beyond that much sooner in the process. So we found that's really helpful, not just in our early careers recruitment, but again in that sort of professional experienced hire.
So I'm hearing from you that we have to be careful. We can't have the 86 required skills for these jobs. That's going to create problems, throttling our capacity for good candidates, but also it's going to create problems when it comes to the back and forth, getting them to narrow that down to a list of 6 key ones or 4 key ones. Like that's always hard to do to down select to that. So the theme for you so far I'm hearing is we've got to be really clear what we're looking for, and everything else builds up from that. So I'm getting those. And Matt's got 2 good, solid answers every time, his 2 buckets. That's what I'm expecting going forward. So you set those trends so far. Some of the stuff that we're seeing really aligns in the data with what y'all are both talking about. For example, you talked about using the video piece. What we find, we actually survey candidates. They tell us they prefer that to just submitting a resume, which again seems counterintuitive because we are told, make it easy, one click apply, make it as simple as possible. But when you actually dive into it, it's 2 different things that make them more interested in that. Number one, it tells them more about what the company's looking for. They're getting some deeper insight into the things the company is seeking in that role and what's critical for that person in that job. So that's helpful to know. They feel like they're in the know. But the second reason is they get evaluated based on putting their best foot forward, not based on how well they wrote their resume or how well they had ChatGPT write their resume, but how well they can actually answer the question. Or Craig, you're alluding to, how well can I do this task I will be doing in the job? Let me show what I'm capable of, and then pick me or don't pick me, but at least I've shown you what I can do. And they're looking forward to that. So we find in the data candidates are okay not being selected in those cases, at least because they've been able to show what they're able to do, not just thumbs up, thumbs down on a resume and a couple of quick questions that may or may not let them really demonstrate their abilities overall. So we've kicked this around a little bit, Craig. I'm going to come back to you. How does this screening piece here help recruiters, help hiring managers? You've alluded to this a couple of different times in the conversation, but I want to get really crystal clear on this. How does this make sure that those 2 groups, recruiters and hiring managers, are focusing on the right candidates? You've talked about how we've got to be clear on what we're looking for, but talk more about that piece of it and how that fits in the candidate experience and so on.
I think it tries to differentiate between what's nice to have and what is essential. We have lots of different hiring teams across the business as well, because of the way that we're organised as a business. And what we're finding now is that it will also, by having these conversations, you're also able to try and guide the hiring team and say, well, actually, we've recruited for a similar job before, and actually that hiring team didn't quite feel that this is quite as important. Can you please explain to us from your perspective why that particular skill or experience is really important? And as we build up that knowledge, we're trying to maybe challenge a little bit of some biases that are maybe from people's perspectives, and just provide that absolute clarity that whether it be a role we actually don't struggle for applications, or particularly more for roles that we have to source. So some of our niche engineering roles and technical roles, for example, we don't get as many applications for those roles just because the skills don't exist as much in the market. But by having that really clear screening call, intake calls, lots of discovery call, lots of different things that we can call it with the hiring team, it really just provides that clarity from day one so that we know whether the application pops into the system or whether we've had to do some more screening or we've had to look at some of our supporting job boards. When we come across those really good candidates, we know that we can provide that really quick response time, quick turnaround time, because we all have that clarity on actually these are the key things that we need to be able to find somebody who's going to be successful in that job.
We think about this from our angle as talent acquisition leaders, recruiters, the people listening out there in the podcast right now. You think about what Craig was just saying, getting clear on those requirements. It makes our job easier. It makes it easier for the hiring managers. We're all on the same playing field. But I like that angle there talking about the candidate side of it because we're able to respond to them more quickly. We can acknowledge the right ones. If we source someone, we know it's the right one. If they apply, however, if they come in, we can jump right into that versus having this back and forth. Like, is this really the right person or not? And potentially lose them, get left off the hook and miss a chance to hire the right person because we're deliberating over here. When if we'd have done that at the front end, it would be clear, smooth sailing, essentially, towards offer or whatever else is involved there. So lots of discussion around the knockout piece, or the alignment components there. I want to go to some more specific things, Matt, and talk to you a little bit about this, like knockout questions, requirements, really having clarity. Talk about some of those sorts of things we've been kicking around with here with Craig a little bit and how that fits into screening for your stakeholders, your hiring managers at Mastercard.
I'll stick with the theme of twos, right? So, and Craig alluded to it, which I think is great. To me, there are two things that are essential and they have nothing to do with technology. A, we as talent acquisition professionals need to really double down on leading with data, and B, having those talent advisory discussions with the hiring managers. Again, we have no excuse, I feel, in this data-driven world not to know how easy or hard it will be to fill a particular position. We should really know that before we even start searching. And since I know that and have that data, I can now go back to the hiring team or the hiring manager and have that really thoughtful conversation. And that conversation needs to be held very similar to what a top paid consultant from a top tier consulting firm might do with you, really challenging you, asking you to think differently. And ultimately, you may determine that you actually don't have a talent acquisition problem, or you may not have a recruiting problem. You may actually have a hiring problem. And there's obviously a difference there. So once you have that sort of meaty discussion, then to me, everything else after that becomes easy. And then if you have access to the right technology, then it becomes even easier. And I'm embellishing, right? It will never be easy. Hiring is always hard. But to me, if you have access to a tremendous amount of tools, and you don't have those thoughtful conversations up front, the tools may not do much good to your process. But if you have those conversations and you really know what you're looking for and what the desired outcomes are, now the technologies become incredibly powerful.
There's not a hiring manager satisfaction button that I've found in any of the tools that I've ever seen from a recruiting perspective. That doesn't exist. Yeah, I used the term smooth sailing a few minutes ago, and someone out there in the audience probably laughed at that because we all know, as you said, hiring is still hard. You talked about double down on leading with data, starting with that one. Are you talking about like funnel metrics? Are you talking about lead times? Are you talking about here's how many candidates it takes to find the right person? Give us just a little more insight on that if you don't mind, because I'd love to, for someone out there listening saying, okay, sounds great, Matt. What data do I need?
Right. Yeah, and I'm going to go to 3 now. So things are in threes here. Sorry. So the first thing is look at historical data, right? Like you probably, especially if it's a larger company that you're working for and you are using an ATS, even though your ATS might be clunky, you probably can get to a place where you can at least audit what you have done in the past and have a really good understanding of what that picture looks like. Secondly, look at those conversions. How difficult was it to actually fill that role? Did you burn through hundreds of applications or just a few? Did you have dozens of interviews or just a few? What do those conversions look like? And then I would reverse engineer and then look at the external market. So basically look internally first, look at the conversion second, and then look at the talent supply that's available out there. And again, there are a bunch of good tools out there that you can use to help you with that. But even if you have nothing but like a LinkedIn recruiter license, right? You could run a sample search and probably have a really good understanding what the talent supply landscape looks like. And you may actually notice right then and there already that you have a problem. You might say, honestly, based on our conversions, based on how we're running through or burning through applications and talent, there's not enough supply out there to actually fill this role at that level in this market. So that's the kind of analysis that I think is critical to do. Now, in all fairness, I have to say it's easier said than done just because we are all so busy and sometimes it's just really hard to have those thoughtful conversations. And I think we need to give the business, the recruiters, the hiring managers enough runway to actually have those dialogues. If you don't make that room and that time, then obviously it's not going to be effective. But yeah, I would look at those 3 groups and that will really inform you well, I feel, as far as setting yourself up for success.
Excellent. Thank you for, hey, we'll take it if you're expanding to 3 from now on. It's okay. We're good with that. It helps to give some takeaways, some key things. And that was a really good example of some different places to look for that, because someone out there again heard that. And for the first time for them, it was, oh, really, that's a great idea. Or I'm doing 1 and 2, but I've never stopped to think about the external supply. How do I go look at those things? And so connecting those dots there was really powerful. Craig, I'm going to come back to you on this, because I know when we were chatting about this a couple of weeks ago, we talked about this alignment thing and you kind of lit up a little bit. And we've touched on some of the things that you're thinking about, you're doing there. Anything more specific you want to talk about, like knockout questions or using ranking and scoring? I know that's evolved in the conversation a little bit already, but anything else you'd like to add around some of those key sorts of behaviors or tactical things that the people out there listening could take some notes on?
I think just to go back to Matt's point on the previous comment, sure. I mean, we've got really specific examples of this happening quite regularly, because within our business, we're very fortunate that we have some of our key technical leads have got decades of experience with us. They've worked for us for many, many years, and that is fantastic for us as a business. But it does cause a sort of like succession planning challenge when it gets to people who want to retire from our business. And I think the involvement of the technology to be able to pinpoint some of these, so you've talked about knockout questions, scoring questions, video assessment, it does drive a conversation that we've referred to in the past. And Matt's absolutely spot on. I think the TA team, widely TA functions, need to be able to feel comfortable enough in having those conversations that actually potentially external recruitment is not going to solve your challenge in this case. And then that creates some potential opportunities internally within their teams to say, actually, are we thinking about our internal talent when we're talking about this? Because we are certainly looking to grow our teams. So as a business, we look at our net growth at the end of the year. Have we been able to keep hold of people? Have we been able to bring more people through the door? So at the end of the year, there's more people in our business than there was to begin with. That's only possible if we still continue to offer career development opportunities for people internally as well. And sometimes, pinpointing what Matt was talking about, sometimes it's the role of the TA team to try and shape that thinking a little bit and say, we could have the best screening in the world, but if there are only 20 candidates in the whole of the UK who've got these skills and we already employ 15 of them, this is going to be a very difficult role to fill. So having these conversations almost makes you reshape that, your approach to that particular vacancy or that particular requirement, and saying, well, if we've got somebody who's thinking about retiring in 2 years' time, 12 months' time, whatever that happens to be, let's look within the team, look at a development program. What's missing from them that you wouldn't put them in this job today, and almost reshape that conversation, as opposed to probably being a more sort of intake meeting where we'll just go away and we'll try our best. Actually, probably 9 times out of 10, we can either have the data, as Matt says, or the TA who's leading in that position knows well enough the environment, the marketplace, to be able to push back a little bit and say, we could do this, but the likelihood is in 6 months' time, we won't have been able to fill that job. So again, I think that whole screening conversation not only shapes your sort of external TA strategy, but also sometimes makes you think differently about how you would want to bring in those or how you would get those skills and experience looking internally to the business.
That's such a good point to make. We haven't talked really about internal at all, hardly in the conversation today. And I always say the easiest job to fill is the one where you don't lose the person in the first place. How do we make sure we keep them in the business? The hard part is some companies, not all, but some companies don't give their TA team any credit if they move someone inside the business. It's like, nope, you're still accountable for all these other things. You don't get any acknowledgement, any high five. You don't get any other. It's just get back to work. And we should stop and celebrate this for just like 1 second, because that person was doing great work. Now they're doing great work in another area, and it costs us less risk for us as an organization, all the good benefits of that. So I'm glad you touched on that one. Had a flashback there for a second. When I was recruiting years ago, we had one of those situations where there were 6 or 7 people on the planet qualified for a job, and I got one to agree to come work for us, and we actually placed him at RAF Mildenhall over in the UK. So Craig, you talked a lot about some of the different types of roles and things like that, succession, like all those different components, and knowing that some jobs are high volume. We talked about a lot of those, and some jobs we've got to go find the person. Matt, anything you'd like to add on that side of the spectrum where we're having to go and, as you said, discover the talent for those areas where they may not be showing up and applying in droves? We're having to go and seek them out to find the right kind of people for our openings. Anything on that side of the spectrum?
Yes. I mean, there are certain types of roles that we tend to fill all the time, and there's a good amount of track record available to us. I think where it becomes really interesting is just some of these newer roles that are emerging, especially if you are in the tech space and you're building solutions that deploy AI is it's just two letters, but it's such a big buzzword and it means so much to so many people. But yeah, what does that sort of future AI-enabled workforce look like? What are those job families? Should they be different? Are they the same? What skills are we starting to look for? If I'm a software engineer and I work on a product that has an AI component to it, does that make me a software engineer that's an AI engineer as well? Probably not, right? So it gets very interesting from that perspective, just reimagining what that skills architecture of the future looks like. And I think that's where a lot of interesting recruiting challenges will emerge in the coming months and years.
Yes. What do we even call this person? How do we define their job? The skills, it's probably driving some of the skills-based conversation in the broader market is that kind of thing. It's changing quickly. And okay, there's not a person like this on our org chart. Where do we fit them in? They have these overlaps, these other things. Let's look at the skills versus the job itself. But I think that's a really good call out there too, that some of the jobs that we'll be hiring for 2 years from now may not exist today. And that creates a new level of challenge and ties back honestly to the core elements y'all reinforced both in this conversation so many times. Really contracting with the team, thinking about it, talking with them, advising them. Here's what we're seeing in the market. Oh, you're calling it this? Well, our competitors call it that. And they seem to be finding these people. Do we need to change how we're looking at this? And just really being that expert and playing that role with the data you have, because they don't know those things. They don't have that insight that we can bring from that perspective. Okay, so we've talked through a lot of different pieces in this. I've got a couple more questions around the AI component, which you let in there for us on Matt there towards the end. And then I want to ask y'all for a key takeaway before we wrap up today. So Craig, I'll come back to you. We've talked about this a little bit. Anything else that you want to call out when it comes to AI, when it comes to helping with screening, when it comes to preventing or identifying fraud in the hiring process, or some of that where candidates are using it to auto-apply to many jobs, things like that? Anything else where AI can help us be more effective as recruiting teams, recruiting leaders, and really do the work we're meant to do instead of just doing the busy work?
Yeah, I think we've probably touched upon most of them. And Matt's point as well was very valid earlier, just talking about you need to be clear in the use case. So I don't think it's about just using it for the sake of using it. There's got to be a real understanding what are the pain points from a candidate perspective, what are the pain points from a TA team perspective, what are the pain points from a hiring manager perspective, and try and understand how can we ease those. The AI interview scheduling capability within Phenom is like a low risk, because we know organising interviews can be quite tricky, trying to manage candidates' availability versus a manager who has only got an hour free in the next 3 weeks type thing. We all come up against those on a day-to-day basis. So that is a really clear use case that says, actually, if you want to free up time to be able to have more meaningful intake calls, to be able to have that extra 20 minutes preparing the candidate for the interview as opposed to spending 20 minutes trying to find availability, then that's really clear. We've talked before about being really clear on the requirements, because the clearer you are in the requirements, then the more effective the AI, whether it be AI matching. So actually the system looked at this candidate's experience and thinks they're a good fit for this role. That'll only work if the role itself has been well defined. Or you think about some of those screening questions we talked about at the outset, that only comes from having really clear requirements. So the clearer requirements that you've got in terms of what are you trying to solve for, in this case it would be a vacancy, and then being really clear on your process maps and trying to identify where are the areas that you can time save and where are the areas that you might not. Because although there have been great advancements in AI, candidates don't say a recruitment process has been great because they received an automated message at certain points in the recruitment process. Yes, that helps, but that's almost a hygiene factor. They get involved because actually they've had a really good call with the recruiter, or they've had some really engaging marketing content where they think, I could really see myself working for a company like that. So I think it's understanding the process where you can try and take out some of the non-value add activities, so you can be really clear about sharing your employer brand, making sure you've got engaging interviews, for example. That type of stuff is, from my experience and perspective, always going to be that thing that might get you over the line. If you're looking at a candidate who's engaging with multiple companies, where are those moments that really matter, and how can you spend more time on those?
I'm glad you called that one out too, because there's a lot of hype in the market around AI, and that's the conversation today, my goal with this was to help us get to some of those use cases. And y'all have highlighted several in this conversation that really add value. It's not just about marketing. It's not just about telling us, but it's really about, as y'all pointed out, making the life better for recruiting teams, the hard work they're doing, the good work they're doing, but the hard work. Hiring managers who are doing this on top of 87 other things on their to-do list. And this is just one more thing, and how to make it easier for them, make it a better experience. And the candidates who are trying to support their families, support their livelihood. This is really important to them. It's not just a passing fancy. It's something that they're really investing their time into, and we need to recognize and support that. Matt, anything else that you would kick in here on what Craig was talking about, some of the upper limit maybe of what AI can do, or how to be judicious and how we're using that so that we're not overpowering that innate hope or desire for a human connection somewhere within this process?
Yeah, no, I think Craig did a really good job outlining it. That there are some lower level or lower risk use cases. I think anybody that you speak to will probably not have an issue with having a career site that generates better content, or having an interview scheduling process that goes faster. So if it's an experience play, a content play, a speed play, and AI can help you, I think the path to bringing it to life is a lot more viable. Where I think all of us are just worried about, we see great potential there, but we need to be worried about is just when AI helps you make decisions of some sort, right? So powerful technology that feeds off data. And if you don't have the best data and you not have the right algorithm and you're not super careful, you could potentially scale dysfunction of some sort, right? Stuff that you don't want to happen. So those use cases, while interesting, we're just incredibly diligent, careful around. And I think all of us as TA and HR professionals need to tread very lightly there and just make sure that we do it right, and that we're not jumping the gun and do something that ultimately is going to hurt candidates or outcomes. But yeah, very interesting conversations that are going to take place in the future. The one thing just quickly that I can add is that in order for us to bring those more advanced use cases to life, it's going to be more of a team sport. In the past, when I bought a tool for talent acquisition, it was me and maybe a sourcing partner that sort of spun up the solution. Now, that team sport of having data privacy, AI governance, data strategy, IT, other experience owners part of that sort of decisioning process is critical. So we're becoming really good at collaborating. And so it's a fun exercise. Everything takes a little bit longer, but it's a really good path forward, I feel, to unlock the potential of AI.
I wrote down scaled dysfunction too, because I think that's a warning label for this, for these sorts of things. If we're not doing the right things now, AI will help us not do the right things even faster. So we have to be careful that we have it all set up in the front end, and we're putting the right practice and thought into that, and care and concern to make sure we're doing it right. So many good takeaways in that. Craig, your last soundbite, last comment, last thing you want to leave the audience with, the takeaway from the conversation today. It doesn't matter to me if you want to double down on something you said earlier, if there's something else you haven't shared yet as a key sort of message for them, but you've got leaders out there who are at organizations the size of Leonardo and smaller, doing the good work. You've got recruiting teams, HR teams, everyone listening in here. What sort of things would you share with them to wrap up today's conversation?
I can only speak from our experience, but we've benefited, and it's the same with, I'm sure lots of other people try this, but testing things. Just because you decide to use some screening in a particular area, or even on a particular role, for example, it doesn't mean you need to do it on every single vacancy that you've possibly got. So testing, whether that be screening, whether that be some form of AI, doesn't need to be everything all from first time, because you won't get it right. Or that's our experience, is that when you go do something, you test it in a safe environment. But as soon as you put it on a live vacancy where you've got tens, hundreds of people applying, you've got people involved in the process, you will learn. And I think what we've tried to do over the past sort of 18 to 24 months is let's experiment safely, but let's learn as we go. And that we've found, ultimately, to Matt's point, it might take slightly longer, but you'll typically get a better outcome. So it doesn't need to be, you don't have to suddenly have screening on every single live vacancy you've got. Maybe test a handful, maybe test it on the type of job that it's maybe better suited at. And don't be afraid to then change it again. We've tried lots of things. Lots of things have worked. Some things haven't. We've learnt our lessons. But I think that for us has been really crucial when you're doing anything new. Test it, make sure you're comfortable with it before you go any further. We've definitely taken that approach to most of the things that we've done from a sort of TA, automation, AI perspective over the last couple of years.
Okay. Recruiting as a science. Test, experiment, test again, and don't be afraid to try some things out. Excellent. Matt, what's your closing thought for us here?
Great stuff. Honestly, I'm super excited about being in talent acquisition right now. I have peers in the business. Some of them are a little bit depressed. They say, oh my God, it's getting so technology advanced and everything becomes automated. And like, to me, the way I look at it, this is by far the best time to be in talent acquisition. There's loads of innovation opportunity to be had. But then the other thing that I think, and this is really the prime reason why I'm in talent acquisition in the first place and still am today, is because with all this AI and all these automations and all these optimization opportunities, there's going to be a premium on genuine human experiences. And we have an opportunity to embrace that and double down on that and make those moments matter even way more than in the past, right? So to me, that's a great reason to get up every morning and be excited about this business. Yet at the same time, if you shy away from innovation and technology scares you, you'll be in trouble. Like, embrace that. It's going to be the foundation. But at the same time, it's a pathway to really doubling down on human experiences, which is super exciting.
The human experience could become a novel thing, and it will be a competitive differentiator for the companies that are willing to lean in on it. That's what I'm hearing right there. Excellent. Thank you again to both of you for spending some time here today. You were both incredible. So many good takeaways. I was taking notes the entire time, getting some good ideas out of this. I know the audience out there enjoyed it as well. To the Phenom team, thanks for connecting us with the intros. I appreciate them. And to everybody else out there listening in today, I hope you'll go out, take some of the things you learned today, think about your processes, make some adjustments, test and experiment, emphasize the human, and we'll catch you again next time on We're Only Human.
Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm honored to have you as a listener. If you enjoyed this episode, please take 10 seconds to rate it at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, if you know a friend that could benefit from today's conversation, please pass it their way. After all, a rising tide lifts all ships. To see show notes, sponsor information, and our full show archives, visit onlyhumanshow.com.